Time to talk to the Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Ted O'Brien, the author of this policy. Now, he says nuclear will deliver cheaper power, despite experts saying it is one of the most expensive forms of electricity. Either way, it would be at least 11 years before the first reactor comes online, under the Coalition's best case scenario. All 7 would take well into the 2040s to deliver. So what does happen in the meantime? Will the market stop investing in renewables and batteries, the stuff the industry says we need right now as coal plants shut down? That's the fear of the Australian Industry Group, which represents manufacturers. It's worried power prices will only rise if investors hit the brakes. Ted O'Brien, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, David.
So just clear this up for us. Coal plants, we know, are closing. If there is no replacement for them, will prices go up?
No, you see, our approach is a balanced energy mix, and Labor's approach is all eggs in one basket, renewables only. We all know what happened to Labor's promise of a $275 reduction in household power bills. Australians now are paying among the highest electricity prices in the world. Under our plan, we have learnt from other markets around the world, and therein is the importance of a balanced mix, which means today we have renewables, we have gas, and we have coal. As we move towards the future, we see 90% of our baseload power exiting the grid within 10 years. In the future, we will still have renewables, we will have gas, and we will have zero emissions nuclear energy.
I'll come to that.
As part of the net zero grid.
In the next 10 years, as these coal plants shut down, as you agree, won't prices go up if that investment isn't there to replace them right now?
You're right in that if you have limited supply, then prices go up. Price is always a function of supply and demand.
So do you want investment to continue in these renewables?
And so we do need to bring in more supply. Critically, we have been criticising the government on strangling the supply of gas. We need to pour more gas into the market. Then when it comes to renewables, we support the continuation of rolling out renewables, but we're different from the government. The government believes the aim of the game is to maximise the amount of renewables on the grid. They want the maximum amount. We want the optimum amount, optimum as part of a balanced mix.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is right now you've got Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen still wanting 82% renewables on the grid by 2030.
What do you want?
Nobody believes them. Nobody believes it's even possible, right? And so here's the problem. Investment has already stalled. And so much as Labor's out there now saying, oh, if the Coalition introduces zero emissions nuclear energy,
investment with respect hasn't stalled. It's absolutely continuing. If 82% is too much,
David, to be honest, it has. If I can make this point, it's actually
who's told you that it has?
If you look at any of the research, look at what even the Clean Energy Council says. Look what experts like Tony Wood say. Labor's rollout is running about 1/3 of the pace that it said it would.
It hasn't stalled though. It's about 4 gigawatts a year. It needs to be higher, but it's not stalled.
Final investment decisions on renewables have fallen since the Coalition entered office. That is a fact. Are renewables still coming on the grid? Yes,
okay,
and we welcome that, but it's already stalled,
okay,
and that's why they've introduced a capacity investment scheme.
Explore this. You welcome more renewables, but David Littleproud, the Nationals leader, has said you want to cap the large-scale renewable rollout. Can you give us any? Is he right? Do you want to put a cap there? What's your explanation of the market?
In fairness to David Littleproud, I too read those same reports, and David addressed this at our joint press conference on Wednesday and made it very clear that as a coalition we are united around that vision of a 2050 net zero electricity grid. And we understand the importance of a balanced mix to get there, and that includes renewables.
Do you want to cap investment in renewables?
No, there's no discussion about capping investment.
Well, he said we want to send the investment signals that there is a cap on where we go with renewables.
And he has subsequently himself addressed that.
So that's
on
not
Wednesday.
Right?
On Wednesday, he explained that is not the coalition position. We will continue to look.
So your message to the market
renewables
right now, to companies like AGL and Alinta and so on, is to keep investing.
We need investment continuing on renewables, on gas, and as you see...
No cap.
As you see zero emissions nuclear energy coming into the market, you will see a balanced mix. And we'll, again, in due course, we'll be talking more about the balanced mix as we will about the economics.
So not 82%, but you will have a figure of, what, 60% renewables? Or...
We're not releasing anything today,
No,
David,
I understand, but that will come.
But 82% by 2030, Labor to this day says it's going to do it. I cannot find a serious analyst in this country who suggests that is even possible.
What about
Meanwhile,
by 20...
prices are going through the roof.
2050 net zero is a bipartisan position.
It is.
But how much will nuclear make up of the mix under your approach? We showed earlier what other groups reckon it'll be, less than 5%. What will 7 reactors deliver?
So to clarify, we're talking about 7 plants.
So it could be more than 7 reactors.
7 plants, right? And one of the lessons we've learned from overseas is in order to get costs down, you need multi-unit sites.
So a plant could have more than 1 reactor?
Correct. So let's say the small modular reactors, for example, and there are different ones, but if you say a 300 megawatt reactor, right? When you talk about a nuclear plant, these are modularised compartments. You can build 300, add another 300, add another 300, right? So you're talking about multi-unit plants.
So you could have, what, half a dozen reactors on one plant?
Well, we would, in terms of exactly how many on any plant, we would be leaving that to the Independent Nuclear Energy Coordinating Authority. But it is right that we would be wanting multi-unit sites. That's how you got to get costs down. Again, what we are doing is based on best practice internationally.
And what the market needs to know is then how much of the mix will be nuclear? Will it be 10%?
And so again, our energy mix we'll talk about in the future ahead of the next election. This is what the market
needs to know now. I mean, if it's only going to be a tiny fraction of the market...
They won't have long to wait, David, until they understand the energy mix.
Look, they need to know very soon, well, right now, really, whether they should keep investing or not. And what matters is whether nuclear is going to make up 20, 50% of the energy mix or 2 or 3% of the energy mix.
So a couple of things. Firstly, I'm a Liberal and I appreciate and respect that investors want to make money. But to be really clear, our focus is on the Australian people who want to save money. And so we have designed this policy with a crystal clear vision of Australians paying for cheaper, cleaner and consistent 24/7 power.
They'll only do that if the market keeps investing, as you've acknowledged at the outset.
And I think I've answered that, acknowledging the need. But
they'll only invest if you give them some clarity on whether nuclear is going to take up 50% or 2% of the mix.
They will get clarity. And
do you know this answer?
In terms of the broader energy mix, David, we will be coming out with that in due course.
But do you know yourself, or will you leave this to another body to work that out? You mentioned earlier this body that will work out how many reactors will go on each plant site. That suggests you haven't worked this out. So
we have done our planning and we'll be very explicit about our assumptions.
Do you know?
But about our assumptions.
Do you know the answer to this question?
Rephrase the question. Is it
the question
specific
is,
gigawatts?
how much of the energy mix will be nuclear under your plan?
We will be announcing that at the time that we announce our broader mix. Because, David...
But do you know it at the moment? Do you know it at the moment? Or would this be for an independent body to work out?
We've announced the nuclear part of our policy. We are yet to announce the renewables part. We're yet to announce the gas part and any market reforms that come with it. And this is why it's so important you look at the balanced mix, because you and I, when we go home, we see our energy bill. What's in that bill is a reflection of the entire system, the balanced mix. And therefore, when people talk about costs, and they have, and I don't blame them, I don't blame them at all, but the real question is not on nuclear, for example, how much it costs, but is it value for money?
I think a lot of people worry about how much it costs and whether it's going to be pushing their bills up.
But it's from a
coming back to this question, because I just want to be clear on this.
Go ahead.
You're not sure at the moment whether nuclear would make up only 5% of the energy mix?
David, we've done all the work on the nuclear front, but
do you know this?
But until we release renewables policy and gas policy, I'm not going to be talking about the portion of the mix.
Will that come from you before the election?
We'll be very clear as to what we believe the potential capacity could be through to 2050.
Okay, so that will come before the election. That won't be for an independent body to work out.
The independent body is to work out at each site what is the feasibility of certain technologies, and only from there can you come down to a specific number of gigawatts. So that's just that is the same with.
So the number of gigawatts would be left to an independent body to work out how many gigawatts.
The independent bodies would look at each plant and come up with a recommendation as to what sort of technology should be used, and from there it would be exactly what capacity based on that technology.
So you won't know before the election how much nuclear energy we're going to get?
We'll be crystal clear on what we have planned for 2050. That's what I just said.
But you just said the independent body will work out how many gigawatts.
Well, there's two things happening here, David. Two things happening right now, right? You're talking about us formulating policy, and we'll be very clear about how we've done it. And I'm happy to talk about how we've done it today. I'm just not announcing.
No, I'm just after this. The market.
Hear me out.
You talk to anyone in the market right now, they will say, we need to know how much is nuclear going to make up of the pie.
And therefore, we'll be clear about our planning process to say, this is how much capacity we believe the Australian market will have of nuclear come 2050.
Okay.
But then when your question goes to, so the very specific gigawatts or megawatts, well, again, we're going to have an independent nuclear energy coordinating authority that will look at each plant.
That is the capacity, though, isn't it?
But it's the same right now. If you look at wind, if you look at solar, if you look at gas, if you look at coal, has Anthony Albanese or Chris Bowen been able to tell you precisely the megawatts in any future year? I ask you that. Have they? They never have.
The integrated system plan from the Australian Energy
and
Market Operator does give you that.
Have they been accurate?
Well, they update it every year, and
but have you looked back to see if they're accurate, David?
I haven't personally looked back to see how accurate that is, but it's there. It's in black and white every year.
This is the problem. The integrated system plan by the market operator, I feel desperately sorry for them because they have to accept the Albanese government's targets and then they've got to work it out. Instead, our approach is to put the Australian consumer, the household, the business at the centre of everything, from system planning all the way through to system design. That creates a very different marketplace, but it gets prices down.
Will you still need the renewables rollout to continue to cover 95% of the energy mix?
No. We will still need renewables in the mix. Labor is assuming up to 98%, again, if you believe the ISP. So a 98% renewables energy grid.
What will yours be?
So again, and you're very good at this, but I'm not going to be announcing. Okay. I'm not going to be announcing next. But I will make this point, David. We believe that Australia needs always on 24/7 baseload power in the system. If you get 98% of the grid, which is all variable and weather dependent, as we move forward and we have to tackle the challenge of climate change, we all know that weather is going to become more volatile. So the last thing we should do is have our entire electricity system weather dependent. You need baseload power.
There's still gas as part of their plan, batteries and pumped hydro for.
Well, they say gas is part of their plan, but we have not seen one initiative. There's not one funding program in the budget. The lights are going to go out under Labor. Prices are going to soar.
Where does the figure of more than $1 trillion for the renewables rollout come from?
So that comes from the Princeton University, University of Queensland and University of Melbourne study. They modelled different scenarios. One of those scenarios is similar. It is not the precise scenario of Labor's. In fact, I think it's conservative compared to Labor's. And that's where that number comes from.
And that includes, just to be clear for everybody, not just the government, but industry, households, you putting solar on your roof, buying an electric car, it's everything, isn't it?
That is the total cost, whether you or I pay for that as consumers, David, or as taxpayers.
Yeah, it's not just the poles and wires, right?
You can be sure of one thing.
It's transport, it's everything.
You can be sure of one thing. It's not being built by charities. It will be built by government.
But it's not the taxpayer, to be clear.
It will be a mix of taxpayers.
No, but it's everything. And this report,
it will be a mix of taxpayers and private sector.
This same report,
as will our mix.
This same report that you're quoting from also says nuclear power should not be in our plans because it's too expensive and slow.
So they did not run a scenario on nuclear. Okay. They ran. I don't want to be overly technical. They ran a sensitivity, not a scenario.
They were pretty clear, though, that it's too expensive.
And so I can assure you the work that we have done in the nuclear area is far more methodical and comprehensive because that analysis was a sensitivity, not a scenario. They're very different things in the modelling world.
All right, well, let's look at some other figures. This is when nuclear power does come online in the 2040s, once we've got the 7 plants and an unknown number of reactors under your plan. The CSIRO and AEMO, here's what they reckon. Solar is still a lot cheaper. You've got coal still very cheap, that'll be gone. Solar, that includes the transmission lines, the storage that's required with it. In the middle there, pretty cheap. Large-scale nuclear, more expensive. Small modular reactors, off the charts expensive. Why are they wrong?
So if you have a look at the large-scale bar there, for example, they are assuming that nuclear power plants last for about 30 years. In fact, they last for up to 80 years, probably up to 100, right? So that makes a big difference. Secondly, they assume that nuclear power plants run for just over half the time, whereas nuclear power plants are actually always on. I mean,
well, let me show you this. This is another report. This is the International Lazard report. You'd be aware of this. Comes out every year. It too finds solar, wind pretty cheap. Nuclear is the most expensive, and they have a utilisation rate of 97% and an 80-year lifespan for nuclear. Why are they wrong?
Again, with the Lazard report, what it looks at, not dissimilar to CSIRO, by the way, is the wholesale part of electricity. So if you have 1 unit extra of electricity, what does it cost compared to different technologies? Here's how we're looking at it. We're looking at it from the consumer's point of view. So you have to look at wholesale price is important. So are network charges.
So the wholesale price might be really expensive, but you would what?
Well, I don't think they
subsidise
are. I don't think they are. If you even look at what you just showed there, it is comparable to gas, for example. It is comparable to coal, for example.
You're running at 24/7. Gas you can turn on and off.
Well, and it's comparable to coal, for example. And we know that
coal will be gone by then.
No, but you're talking about the report you just showed, right?
Yep.
It is comparable to coal. And we know that in Australia, at the turn of the century, Australia had among the cheapest electricity in the OECD. Now, that was due to coal. Now, as we move forward, as coal retires, exits from the system, it will be replaced with zero emissions nuclear energy.
Would you heavily subsidise that wholesale nuclear pricing?
We're not talking about subsidisation. We are talking about government ownership.
So no subsidies for people's bills.
Again, we'll be very clear about market reform ahead of the next.
Let me ask you about local consultation here. We saw the confusion earlier on. What does happen if locals don't want a nuclear plant?
So one of the big lessons that I've learnt, sort of talking to a lot of people internationally about this, is the importance of trust and transparency. And that is why, from the get-go in opposition, Peter Dutton was very clear, very open. We are looking at zero emissions nuclear energy.
What if locals say no?
And so when it comes to our community engagement process, I was up in Muswellbrook, which is one of the communities which might be hosting a plant, on Friday. And I was talking to a lot of people there. And the conversation we had was around their needs as a community. So one of the benefits we have of nuclear is up to 77% of workers in a coal plant can seamlessly transition to a nuclear plant in the same occupation.
Okay, back to the question. What if locals say no?
Well, I don't think that will happen, David, because we've got...
I'm sure you don't, but what if they do?
But let's lay out what we're planning to do, okay?
No, I'm just asking what your approach is if locals say no.
So can I lay out our approach, which includes engaging with locals? So upon coming to government, we will have a 2.5-year community engagement process. Ultimately, the decision, we are part of a Westminster system of government. The decision will be a matter for the minister. Now, if I am the minister at that time, my decision, of course, will be based on the independent coordinating authority's feasibility report. What's in our national interest and what's in the community interest. On the community interest, we need to account for economic, social and environmental issues. They are the very issues for the last 2 years, as I have heard complaints about how the Albanese government has been steamrolling over communities. They are the 3 areas they've come up with.
So if a community says,
social and community.
So if a community says no, you
But when you say
that.
community says no, it sounds like you're asking, are we going to have a referendum? No, we're not. That is not best practice internationally.
You were chair of a parliamentary inquiry only a few years back titled Nuclear Energy, Not Without Your Approval. That was the title. You said the will of the people should be honoured. Is that still your view?
Well, that report was under the Morrison government. And if you remember the 2019 election, David, I was part of that. You covered it as well as you always do. We were never publicly talking about introducing nuclear energy.
So that doesn't stand anymore?
We never took it to the people.
All right, so the will of the people is no longer something that must be honoured?
No. In fact, David, I think that's a better question for Labor and the Greens, and I'll tell you why.
You're here right now.
We are now taking this to the Australian people.
Okay.
We are seeking a mandate. So what I wrote in the report then is consistent with this term of government, albeit this term of government, we're going to all Australians saying this is what we plan to do. The question for Albanese is, if we actually get a mandate, will he respect and will he facilitate the uplifting of the moratorium? Same with the Greens. Are they going to stand in the way and delay action on climate change?
It doesn't sound like you're able to say whether locals will be able to stop these things at the moment. A mandate.
But when you say
Peter Dutton says he's happy for this to be a referendum on nuclear power. Will you accept the outcome of the election? If you don't win the election, will you drop the nuclear idea?
Peter Dutton has made it clear, and I've heard him say it many times. He is more than happy for this election to be a referendum on cheaper, cleaner and consistent electricity.
And he said nuclear energy.
And of course, nuclear is part of a balanced energy mix, and
that's it.
And very happy to be public about that.
So if you don't win, that's it?
Okay, when it comes then to if we don't win, firstly, we plan to win, and we are doing nuclear energy as part of our mix, because it's a right thing by this nation. David, it's going to be people like you who will run commentary on that, as you should.
I'm just asking whether you would accept the outcome of what you say is a referendum on this nuclear plan.
Well, no, I didn't say it's a referendum on nuclear. No, Peter Dutton's made it very clear.
He said he's very happy for this to be a referendum on energy and nuclear power.
Energy,
you're right. Nuclear power.
Because we want cheaper, cleaner and consistent. And as part of that, is nuclear part of it? But David,
so you're not willing to even say you would accept the outcome?
Let's extend your logic, right? Let's extend your logic. As part of our plan, we are going to be saying renewables are important.
Yeah.
So if we were to lose the election, do we dump renewables? I mean, we're going to be saying gas is important. You're saying if we lose the election, we dump gas?
You might still keep going on nuclear even if you lose the election.
David, we are doing this because it's in our national interest. The lights are going to go out, prices are soaring. It's happening today. The operator's out there. So are we doing this because it's easy? No. But we are doing this because it's in the national interest.
Final question.
And that's what we're doing.
For voters, though, weighing this up between now and then, if they... we still don't know the cost, the impact on prices, how many reactors there might be.
We'll come out with our economics in due course.
But would you say if voters don't know, they should vote no?
I know where you're getting that phrase from. And one thing that's very different from the Labor Party and the coalition is even on their renewables target, it's all about the vibe. It always has been. Their single policy instrument at the moment is the 82%...
Your nuclear plan, which has a lot of gaps in it.
Renewables is a capacity investment scheme. Labor to this day cannot tell you how much it's going to cost. We will. We will have more information out there about our plan than Labor. That's always been the case. It is the case today, David.
Well, we look forward to seeing that and look forward to having another chat once...
Appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for joining.
Cheers.